Welcome everybody to our UN Open Source Week event. My name is Darren. I'm the moderator today and also president of SDG Youth Connect, one of the two partner organizations of today's event, with the other being, of course, the United Nations Youth Office. And so today's theme and context for today's event is three main components of youth-led open source AI. Number one is that unequal access deepens divides across the world. It is so crucial that AI reshapes economies, governance, and tech all across the world, but unequal access to infrastructure, with millions, if not billions, having not even access to simple internet and computers, creates a widened gap between developed and developing countries and creates an even higher risk for inequality. Now, the next is SDG progress is always at risk. This inequality threatens progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly for emerging economies, and it specifically targets SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, and SDG 17, partnership for the goals, among others. And finally, open source AI is a pathway to democratize access and empower youth across the world. Yet, young people still remain underrepresented in governance and innovation structures. Now, before we delve into our expert panels, we will go into a bit about what SDG Youth Connect is. Founded in 2023, now 3 years ago by me, SDG Youth Connect makes awareness, advocacy, and action around the SDGs accessible, meaningful, and powerful, helping young people build a better future before the end goal of the 2030 Global Agenda, with a current network of over 2,000 people in over 65 nations. Now, we have three key A's, or goals of our organization. One is awareness, and that is building global understanding of the Sustainable Development Goals among youth communities across the world, as they are our future leaders. Advocacy, amplifying youth voices in policy and multilateral spaces to ensure that the voice of youth and SDG youth is heard across the world. And finally, action. We want to support youth-led initiatives that drive measurable SDG progress and make sure that no initiative is left behind and that there is equal access to the SDGs in the world. And finally, if it's ever possible, please support our mission at givebutter.com/SDG-youth-connect. And now, before delay, I'm now going to introduce our expert panel opinions. And our expert panels are Alexandra Wetley, our first panelist, and also will be introduced later, Henry Kihika, who has now been moved as a presenter and will be right after the panelists, and Samuel Matamilola, the West African director at SDG Youth Connect, and Maximilian or Max Werner. Thank you for all of them to join us today. And first off, I will start with the first of 5 themes of our organization and of our panel. And that is going to be, how can open source AI, and we'll start with Alexandra, how can open source AI be used effectively to support progress on the SDGs in both developed and developing contexts? And Alexandra, if you'd like to begin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Darren. Good evening, good afternoon to everyone. So the first thing I'd say is about auditability, because open source in itself isn't valuable simply for ethical reasons. It's valuable as a development tool that AI systems carry. They carry the bias of where they were trained. And a model built on data from one context doesn't automatically work in another. So being able to open up a model and check whether it's actually fit for your situation is can everyone hear me? Apologies.
Yes, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Fit for your situation is basically the only real safeguard against quietly importing someone else's assumptions as if they were neutral facts. I'd actually go further and call this uh, an isomorphism, where the same economic and social structures get exported from the global north to the global south, just encoded in a model instead of a policy. I've personally seen this dynamic up close in places like Abkhazia, a region that's politically and economically isolated in ways that don't get much international attention, where the human right consequences of being on the wrong side of these gaps is very real and is not abstract. Open source gives that kind of region a chance to inspect and adapt the tool rather than simply inherit whatever assumptions it was built with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandre. Now, Maximilian or Max, please continue.
Perfect. Thank you for the floor. Before I get into it, I'd like to introduce myself, who I am, what I do, and why it connects to today's session on AI. I'm Maximilian. Feel free to call me Max. I am currently an undergraduate at Columbia University and Sciences Po in Paris, and I'm the founder of the Liminal Minds Initiative. Concretely, we are an NGO that focuses on integration and cultural friction. That could be amongst people who have immigrated from war-torn regions, all the way to people who just seem to have a very international background, having moved across countries growing up. And across the founding process of our NGO under our university's partnership with the UN Academic Impact Millennium Fellowship, we have experienced a lot of barriers to building up an entire NGO that's legally registered, that operates with partnerships with directly with governments and with universities on an institutional scale, and also seeing a representation at the UN and partnership with its bodies and major groups. This was a big challenge for a 10-member part-time university student-run NGO, as we were when we started. However, this brings me to the most important point that I'd like to bring up, is that AI is often seen with suspicion from multilateral organizations, and for good reason, due to the risks that come with it. That could be hallucination, that could be bias. It's just not the magical tool that we imagine it to be, even though as it improves, it may get closer to the standard, but it's not a magical one-fix-all solution. What it is, however, is a fantastic opportunity for nation states, multilateral organizations to embody, embrace, train, and to coordinate with, so that efficiency and barriers, whether that's technical barriers for website development, administrative barriers for legal advice, or even linguistic barriers for translation, these barriers can be reduced and impounded once we do have a sort of international collaboration to regulate and promote the positive and reliable use of AI for civil society organizations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'm giving the floor to Samuel. Samuel, you may begin.
Okay, so yeah, good evening, everyone. Sorry, it's a bit black here, so I'm not able to turn on my camera. But yeah, I say it's a very good one. I'm Samuel Matemlola, Regional Director for SDGs Connect West Africa, and I should say the to talk about open source AI. It acts as a powerful catalyst in improving the sustainable development goals, and by I think jumping the bureaucracy of access to high impact technology. But here in the global south, we see there is still a little bit of ignorance to seeing how people know a lot about open source. In a country like Nigeria, for example, we understand that open source AI has not really been actually known fully, even to the youth generation of this country. But we can see how we can use programs like this, and to see how we can run initiatives just like the ones we are planning currently in SDGs Connect Nigeria, to see how we can inform the people about open source softwares, and seeing on how they themselves in in the global south, open source AI has not been really been explored. But due to initiatives that we're planning to roll out, we expect more progress on involving the youth to knowing more about open source AI.
Thank you so much, Samuel. And now I will give the floor back to Alexandra for our second talking focus, and that is if you have any practical examples of open source AI tools or projects you have been or are involved in, and what has made those projects impactful. Please, Alexandra, begin.
Thank you, Darren. So for this second theme that we're going to be discussing, I personally have authored an official submission to UNCTAD's intergovernmental group of experts on e-commerce and the digital economy on the digital tax gap. So I mean, the core idea, in my opinion, I'll go first with this one. So the technical point underneath it's simple. The digital value today is generated through data pipelines and models that operate across borders almost frictionlessly. But the tax architecture we have was actually built for goods crossing a physical border, not data crossing a virtual one. So even when open source AI spreads fast into a developing market, the economic value that it will create often gets captured somewhere else entirely by whoever owns the infrastructure layer above the open model. What made that submission impactful wasn't really flagging the problem, it was trying it to a specific policy mechanism that member states could actually act on. The second thing I'd actually highlight is more technical. In research work I've done, including a co-authored paper on photonic sensing for smart grid applications, the consistent lesson is that a tool impact is capped by its deployability, not its sophistication. A highly optimized model that requires infrastructure only a handful of labs have access to doesn't scale into impact. The open source projects that actually move the needle tend to be the ones deliberately built to run on modest hardware, with documentation that doesn't assume a research lab level of background. That design choice is not really an accident, and it's one I think gets undervalued. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Alexandra. And now, Max, please continue.
Thank you. These are great points brought about. And on the theme of AI and potentially some examples to explain its mechanism with multilateral coordination, I'll give this concrete example. My NGO from experience, we created this index number, or through research, we're in process of developing with universities and faculty at certain research institutes and think tanks. How can we measure integration? How can we quantify something that's just not quantifiable? It's putting the Gini coefficient and bringing it to another level because you can measure inequality in terms of wealth, but how do you measure something that is almost purely qualitative? AI has allowed us to expand our research. Concretely, we're able to gain access to models like Notebook LM through partnership with NGOs for Google, and also gain access to a lot of other web dev tools that allowed us to collaborate, work, and communicate directly with experienced technical professionals and legal experts on drafting, registering, and bringing things about. And back on the topic of research itself for the liminality index as a concrete example, AI has allowed us to scan, test, permutate this formula, this mathematical formula that we made with 4 factors, something that would take so much time and so many resources that just aren't available, not only for certain students, but also for a lot of civil society organizations globally. I believe this is a microcosmic example of how AI has so much potential, but it must be first perceived and then implemented in a way and to a level that, simply put, allows responsible use and allows us to reap the maximum benefit to civil society organizations in collaboration with international organizations like the UN, World Bank, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Max. And now to Samuel.
All right. I think this question is very, very, very nice. So I should say, alongside SDGs Connect, alongside the SDGs, I'm currently a researcher for my tertiary institution society, and as of end of this month, I was privileged to be at the African AI Summit Omniverse, where we saw different people bring research about open source. And one thing I got to understand from all this is, you see, we as in global South, I don't know, I'll be directing my answers to focus more on this region. We see that we are a vibrant hub for open source, and we have severally led local initiatives, right? It might not be directly from SDGs Connect Nigeria, as we said, but seeing the progress. But other projects I've seen and I've been able to look at their works. Right, I was at the African summit that was just held. Was basically on open source artificial intelligence. This project demonstrates that we're not just using open source here to write code. We are building digital public infrastructure. I think one that really took my wing, and I've been visiting them, was a digital civic technology stuff that came out in May 2026. And it looked as using an example of open source AI to apply it to governance and transparency. And they built a gamified AI powered tool that teaches young people about civic rights, budget transparency, and every other thing. And we have also seen in the essence in African AI system, whereby we are building our local LLMs with local languages. So you've seen, I think there's one called Masakani. It's a grassroots community-led research organization that has deep roots in in Nigeria through its NLP working group. That's SG4, 9, and 10, and they have created open source data sets for indigenous Nigerian languages. And I'm looking at this project because it makes it look more genuine. It's been understandable by the people who uses all these models. And I'm saying, even in the Nigerian AI Scaling Hub, we have seen progress about using open source, even into education as well. So we are building on existing infrastructure, and we are not reinventing the wheel, but we are taking open source assets from the Nigerian AI repository, and we're integrating them into an online first architecture similar to the accessibility approaches seen in the current civic democracy work. And in SDGs Connect to we are also looking at building an open source AI model to understand young children ability in the southeastern part of the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. And now we will head into our last question with Alexandre, starting with Alexandre. And this is, how can collaboration between governments, multilateral organizations, the open source community, and grassroots youth actors ensure responsible development where it is most needed? Starting with you, Alexandre.
Oh, thank you, Darren. So I would actually start for this thematic with a structural observation from sitting across roughly 9 to 10 UN bodies as a youth delegate for SDG Youth Connect and for UNEP Gen. Youth and grassroots actors are consistently brought in to comment on frameworks that are already substantially finalized, not to help design them. From a technical standpoint, that's actually a real loss because the people closest to deployment are usually the first to see where a model breaks down in a specific context, whether that's a language it wasn't trained on, an edge case in the data, or an assumption that doesn't hold locally. That feedback loop should run upstream into design, not just downstream into critique. The second point is actually about funding. Multilateral institutions are good at producing frameworks and declarations, but the harder, less visible work, the last mile technical implementation, implementation is usually being carried by grassroots groups operating without that institutional backing. Directly resources toward Directing resources toward existing technical capacity on the ground tends to be far more efficient than building parallel top-down programs that duplicate work already happening. The third point, and the last point for this theme, is about translation. Open source developer communities and multilateral policy bodies often aren't really operating on the same timeline or even the same vocabulary. Youth actors who move between both of these worlds, technical communities and diplomatic ones, can functionally serve as that translation layer, carrying real implementation constraints into policy rooms and carrying policy directions back out to the people building the tools. Thank you, Darren.
Of course. And now, Max, you may continue.
Perfect, thank you. On the topic of collaboration, from research that me and my team did in a research competition against the University of Oxford back in January, on AI and governance specifically, one thing that we did identify is what we called two vectors of collaboration for AI. The first is government to government directly, and then the second is government to civil society. Take this as a interchangeable formula you can plug in instead of governments, multilateral institutions, any body that has some sort of authority. And concretely, what the two vectors are and what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to work in coherence rather than against each other. Governments to governments must communicate. You can't compare one country's AI output and ability to another because the current rat race, if you will call it, and how it's being coined by many journalistic and academic articles, is simply put unfair. The US lies at a level of 72% or 74% high-end compute, whereas the EU on 4.8%. NVIDIA has 92% of the GPU market. So it's simply put not feasible to think of it as an even playing ground. Therefore, collaboration neutralizes this sort of difference and allows us to go one step closer to sharing its benefits rather than simply investing and reaping the benefits from only one actor. It's important that governments collaborate because there's also a degree of information failure when they don't communicate, when there's an asymmetry in between what one country knows and what one country is feasible of doing and another. And the second vector is government or institution to civil society. Simply put, this is how an institution, whether that's national, sovereign, or international, to the organizations created by the communities of us people who live in these communities. It's important that AI is being delivered and supported as a means for promoting sustainable development goals and a lot of the objectives because it is an incredibly useful tool. Apart from my own example, AI is, from my personal dialogue with member states like that of the Maltese government, a highly contested tool for use. Certain delegates do prefer consulting with artificial intelligence for their own research, and certain more old school methodology might be against it. It's important that there's a recognition and an adaptation in a step forwards to adapting to what society has grown used to using. In the global north, so minus isomorphist policymaking, the global north tends to adapt very well with AI because a lot of private sector companies not only profit by using them for increasing efficiency, but also a lot of startups become extremely profitable investments from IPOs. So it's important to understand that that is not applicable on a global scale, and we need to combine the government to government scale plus the government to civil society vector so that all governments globally can work together to share a comparable level of AI development, whilst also having the motivation, incentive, and so to say narrative of saying AI can be a positive tool when used correctly. We're going to invest our resources into studying how it can be made as reliable as possible and how it should be used, rather than forcing civil society organizations facing very high barriers to go out on their own means to research on which AI to use on Google, to find out the hard way which AIs do work and do not through hallucinations and mistakes that can harm the reputation of an NGO in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. And now to finally end off the panelists, Samuel, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is a very, very great question, and this is what I like to talk about most times. So I think to ensure AI deployment in the global south, government must move beyond performative regulation to provide subsidized, localized compute infrastructure and clear data sovereignty policies. In Nigeria, I think I agree with what Philip said in chat box. Access to all these things I really are not really stable a lot in the global south. Multilateral organizations could do very much from pivoting from funding expensive external consultancies to directly finding local and digital public goods. This community must prioritize the creation of low resource models. It's global south, many models come in. Or we can only of these grass non-negotiable auditors and architects of the system. Just what has been building systems, and also I myself too. It's something that young people like us too should architect more. We should ensure that tools, indigenous data sets, and designed to address specific local realities. Emphasis on really specific local realities. We need something that should be able to work for what is happening with us. The insecurity levels in the country is quite very hard movement. We need something that can tell us, okay, that can face the problems that we're facing currently, not what we're receiving, is actually solving the problem of maybe where Alex is in Switzerland currently. No. What we are using to work on, the AI model we're using to work on is currently facing Nigerian system. Those are the kind of things we need. Agricultural education, rather than just simply importing foreign algorithms. I think it's high time for us to keep building systems for us. And we in SDGs Connect West Africa, it's something that we have been trying to do, and we have started it. We launched a climate education awareness program talking about talked about AI too in Benin Republic this month, and all over the regions who have been launching initiatives like that to make sure that we are building something that can address the local system, not importing things from outside. And I think with this we should be able to enhance better in the scaling of open source and AI models across the region. Thank you.
Thank you, all the panelists. Thank you, Alex, Sound. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Samuel. And now we will move on to our next section, which is a short 5 to 7 minute presentation from Henry Kihika. And we will give him the floor.
All right. Thank you, moderator. Can I share my slides, please?
Yep, they will be shared from my side shortly.
All right. Kindly share so that I can be able to start off.
Yep. It has been shared.
All right. When I received an invitation to this conference, really, I started thinking so much about the open source AI and closed source AI, and just something came in my mind, and I said the era of simply clicking a button. You realize that, next slide. Go to the third slide, please. Thank you. Yes, you realize that AI is impacting us in very different SDGs, and those are some of the SDGs that AI is helping us. But quickly, I would want to go to the critical questions, and I think that's slide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Slide 7. 7 with the pictures. Yes. So I would like to quickly go into the critical gist or the critical challenge with open source AI. We have seen that AI is very important, and we see governments in Africa and across the world trying to use AI to come up with development strategies and also improve on people's lives and livelihoods. But there comes another question. Beyond the importance of AI, are we also seeing the negative impact of some of these things? And a colleague of mine still makes a comment, and it sounds funny, but it is a critical comment. He says, as long as my WhatsApp, it's a chatting software app we use in Africa, as long as that WhatsApp cannot still receive my name as an African name and wants to autocorrect it into an English word, I think there's no equity in some of these things. And you realize that even the foundation on which some of these open source AIs are created is not really Afrocentric. Things are made in MIT, things are made in Harvard, things are made in top universities in Europe and just sent down to Africa, sent down to Asia, sent down to Brazil. And they lack the context specific touch in creating some of the things. And also I ask myself a question, is it open AI or it is also still closed? Because now I'll give you an example of ChatGPT that as a researcher I've been using sometimes to come up with concepts, to come up with proposals, also sometimes to do some analysis. You realize that these open source AIs, where they are not giving equitable access to the people in the localities, in the local communities, is that you reach a certain point and this open AI starts demanding for payment to take you to an extra level, to the premium level. And the output this open AI is giving is really shoddy, I can say. And realize that there is still no equitable access when, as long as these AIs, open AI, open source AIs are still demanding for payment from some of these people on ground. Of course, we know some of these softwares need money to be run and to be created and scaled up. But sometimes you find they're asking so much money that a person on ground, maybe if they're asking about which treatment, maybe taking a photo of their skin condition to find out probable prescriptions for whatever they want, you find there is so much that is still needed to be done in order to improve equity. I'll go to the next slide, please, number 8. Yes, so what do we need to do to really make sure that there is equity and also put into consideration the fact that some people are using these AI sources to do their dubious and also terrorist, I can say terrorism, and someone goes on OpenAI and is asking which methods of hanging or which methods of beheading people, and then AI freely gives that information and someone goes ahead. Down here in Uganda, we have a case that has been rolling on for, I think, for 2 months. A certain man went on AI and asked which types of, how can I behead someone? And AI gave them the answers. And we ask ourselves, at what point does AI stop being open? I'm happy that there are some experts here about AI, like Maximilian, who is doing some great work in AI. I would want, if you're designing some of these things, put into consideration those factors. We saw a picture of a robot kicking a young boy in China, and you think of what will happen if these things keep open, and at what point does equity stop being equity? And then we have to apply an issue of fairness, because now things are going to get out of hand and you reach a point where AI is running everything. If AI turns against human beings, who will be there to intervene and make sure that there is harmony between the two entities? Because I think, and I'm beginning to think that at a certain point, some of these things are going to turn against the humankind. I'm not being negative, but you can see what is happening in that picture. The recommendations is that there should be context-specific designs of these AI sources, that if I'm running a ChatGPT and it is Africa-centered ChatGPT, it should be able to recognize the languages in Africa. As one of my colleagues was saying, Samuel, you put in something and it is giving you something that is Eurocentric. I need something Afrocentric so that I can fully enjoy the equity in some of these open AI sources. Last slide, number 9. Yes, so OpenAI source can become a powerful accelerator of sustainable development in developing countries if investments focus on really infrastructure, local capacity, open innovation, responsible governance, and inclusive access rather than importing AI solutions Of course, as I've told you, someone designed something in MIT and throws it to Africa, and then at the end of the day, we are seeing documentaries on these newsrooms, BBC. We are seeing on DWTV that some of this information is being tapped in by to do terrorism, and you're like, this is the weather capturing app. It is giving me weather forecast, but someone behind it is using it to follow me up to the last dot where they can come and finish me off. So at what point, I leave this to the moderator and to the experts here like Maximilian and someone else who presented to think at what point do we stop being open? At what point does AI should at what point should AI stop being open so that at least we still have the security of the people and also they are making sure that they are safe to use these things without having to worry about their personal life and biodata and at the end of the day losing their lives or being put at risk of losing anything just because they're using some of these open AI sources. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Henry, for your great presentation. And the points you raised were just brilliant and very relevant to this day. And you are completely correct as open source AI and AI, artificial intelligence, large language models such as ChatGPT 5, Claude, Fable 5 now, is very dangerous, yet also prospering and promising to our society and as a world, and that equity must be achieved before there is even farther disparity in the tech. And before we move on to the youth share out and expert panels, I just like to say that you're completely right when you say that AI has the potential to turn against humankind, turn against human beings. And right now, it's just up to us humans to implement ethical AI governance and design AI with ethics in mind at utmost first to make sure that that doesn't happen AI and AI continues to serve us as a helpful tool rather than control us or go against us. Thank you so much again, Henry. And we will now move on to the next stage of today's presentation and event, and that is our youth share out. I will be sharing quickly the presentation again. This is the youth share out, and this is a youth-led segment featuring participants from diverse regions, especially representatives of SDG Youth Connect's Youth for Open Source Coalition, sharing experiences, projects, and outlooks on open source AI for sustainability. And as you can see here, these are the goals of our youth share out. And so we shall begin with Hamza. You may come to the floor and I will put your presentation up.
Hello, can you hear me, Darren?
Yep, we can hear you. And we are presenting yours too.
Yes, please share my presentation.
Yep, it is being shared now.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Hamza Kaisar. I am the founder of Skynock and also a part of SDG Youth Connect. Uh, uh, at Skynock, we are focusing on a solution related to precision agriculture. And a lot of people are making solutions related to AI in really diverse fields. But firstly, what we need to look at is who needs a solution and what the real problems of the world are, and how can we use AI to solve them. Like there is a global food crisis right now, and almost 40% of crops are lost to pests and diseases throughout the world. Around 3.1 billion people are managed, and 860 million farmers are exposed to chemicals and diseases because of these fertilizers and pesticide that they use. Next slide, please, Darren. Yes, currently there are solutions to it, but they are really expensive and they are only designed for large farms. Like the average price of a drone for spraying is way more than $20,000, and they are really expensive for small and medium scale farmers. So they are not viable solutions for everyone out there. Next slide, please, Darren. So what's the solution? We have designed a drone equipped with AI, a smart drone that has autonomous flight and that can use AI for crop analysis and precision farming. So that in turn reduces the price a lot, and it can be adapted for smaller and medium scale farmers too. Next slide, please. Yes, these are the main features of our drone that we have, and the AI camera that is equipped on it. It has autonomous flight, object recognition, and also smart spreading using AI. Next slide, please. Yes, what are the benefits of it? Currently, manual spraying is done, which has a lot of hazards for the farmers and all that. But using this, you can save time and also increase the yield of the crops and also decrease the resources used, in turn reduce the carbon emissions that are done by the agriculture sector, because it has a lot of carbon emissions in it. So they benefit a lot from this. Next slide, please. This is the whole market size of it. Next slide, please. Yes. Why did I develop the solution? Because I come from an agriculture background, and I did my degree, bachelor's in computer science. So I try to combine both these things together, and we made this solution because we also had access to data, especially in Pakistan, and to train up the AI models and all that. Also, we built the whole hardware and software ourselves, so that gave us an unfair advantage over everyone else doing this. Next slide, please. Yes, we also won the UN Green Startup Award for this, Best Green Startup Award, and also got a grant from the UN. And thus, we went to represent my startup in COP and COI all over the world in COI 18, 19, and 20, and all that, and even after that. And we are also connected with UNICEF and FAO right now. Next slide, please. This is the roadmap that we have been going through. Next slide, please. This is the expected traction. These are much more for the investors, not for this. So next slide, please. I'm the CEO of the startup, and I'm also looking for a co-founder if anyone is interested. Next slide, please. Finally, thank you. That's all from my side. And this is a practical example of a solution that you can build, and then you can go open source later. Firstly, we were not closed source. Then we open sourced our software. Right now, it's open source, and we changed our model. This is something that also you can do while you are building something, so you can have a better prospect of it. Thank you, and that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Hamza. And again, that was a great presentation on how open source AI could work and be very functional for the SDGs, especially SDG 2 being zero hunger, while also being and congratulating you on your startup's great achievements. And now we will continue with Maria. Please go ahead. And finally, we'll complete with Armen. But first, Maria, please.
Hello, everyone. I am Maria. I'm a young woman from Portugal. I'm the SDG Youth Connect Iberian Director and a member of the National Direction of Conexão Lusófona, which is a formal organization that connects young people across the Lusophone world. I've also been doing some work as an ambassador for Five Rights, which is an organization that tries to defend young people's rights in the online world. Before I talk about artificial intelligence, its benefits, its usage, let me talk about something more fundamental: dignity. The dignity of a community of young people whose language, whose data, whose voice is now represented in the systems that are increasingly making decisions about their lives. And now that we're all here, let me break down this statement into two main ideas. First things first, the fact that young people are being left behind when their language is not used in the creation and training of this model system. 90% of the training data is made by systems in English, which means that, as MIT has discovered in its interviews, etc., that the main chat box, they give significantly less valuable information to people that are not as proficient in English, with less scholarship, and with a non-American origin. This is absolutely terrifying, and I believe that AI holds a genuine promise for local and global sustainability, and it could be such a useful tool. But here is what no one is saying actually out loud, is that if AI is trained on data that does not include us, it cannot make decisions that will serve us or that will represent us in any way. That's why I believe that AI should not make decisions without humans, and that AI should be trained with more languages to be able to actually withhold and withstand more people in the world and be less biased in its judgments. This language, the one I come from, I'm Portuguese, and I come from the Lusophone world, as I said before. We are a diverse community of over 250 million people across 4 different continents. We all come together around this one language, the Portuguese. And this language, as many others, it's not an edge case. And yet, it remains almost invisible in the data sets that shape the future. This cannot be seen as a technical gap. This is a political choice, and it can, has, and should be unmade. AI can really be a powerful tool, as it has been said before, as it has been demonstrated before, that can strengthen human networks, can give us more tools to improve our communities, and amplify voices that were never meant to be heard and are actively trying to be silenced. However, AI must never place a position of power over human decisions. Not in governance, not in justice. Technology does not have conscience. We do. Passing this line won't make us more efficient. It will make us lose ourselves and lose this compassion that we must have for one another. So here is what I ask of this assembly. Let's create binding mechanisms for youth participation and establish one clear principle in every AI framework. Decisions that affect human dignity must always remain in human hands. Thank you so much for hearing me, and I'm sorry a little bit for my stuttering in the start. And it was really nice talking to you all.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was great. And thanks again for presenting. Now we will go ahead to our last youth perspective. That will be Mr. Armen
I have a question.
Matavishi.
I have a question, please.
We will get to your question soon, sir. We just have one more presentation, please.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for all. I'm Professor Bisley Revol, member of UN. Just now, I want to talk of UN. Dominated to work together. So now have a big problem. Just I want to know if I can create a system for you in AD, or you can accompany me about.
Please, we will get to your question soon. Armen, please go ahead. Armen, if you are able to, please.
Well, my best question is.
Armen, if you're there, please begin presenting, and if not, we will go into Q&A. I think you are muted as of now. Armen?
Amen, you are mute. You can unmute yourself.
Yep. Okay. I think he has some technical issues as of now, so I will quickly go through his slideshow and make sure that he gets represented equally. So that will be done, and I'll be sharing soon. Okay. If everyone can see my screen, that would be great. If everyone can see the slideshow. So Armen was going to talk about why his organization, Adifafea World, and it is a youth-led based organization committed to improving the living conditions of marginalized populations across the Democratic Republic of Congo and Africa. And so he is the founder and general director. And at Adifafea World, they are currently exploring how open source AI can strengthen their development work. And one concrete area where they have planned to use open source AI is within their agricultural and women's empowerment programs, specifically through initiatives such as Molimo Kwetu or Agricultural at Home, which supports women farmers and vulnerable households, where we see opportunities to use AI-powered tools to improve access to climate information, agricultural extension services, project monitoring, data analysis, and proposal development. Finally, they see particular opportunities for AI to strengthen agricultural productivity, improve access to development information, support local innovation, and enhance the efficiency of community-based organizations working with limited resources. Finally, some opportunities is that open source AI can expand access to knowledge, accelerate learning, and support evidence-based decision-making when it comes to directly contributing to the SDGs. And some barriers include limited internet connectivity, inadequate digital infrastructure in many nations, unreliable electricity/power, insufficient funding, low levels of AI literacy, and the lack of representation of African languages, local realities, and indigenous knowledge within many existing AI systems. And finally, a call to action that Adifafea World is presenting here is that young people from developing countries must not only be consumers of AI technologies, but they also must be creators, innovators, and contributors. We need greater investments in digital infrastructure, AI education, and open source innovation ecosystem. And we also need stronger commitments to youth-led initiatives to ensure that local communities, African languages, and diverse cultural perspectives are represented in the future development of AI systems. Finally, the future of artificial intelligence should not be built only for developing countries. It must also be built by developing countries. From Armen and Adifafea World, thank you for listening. And now we shall go into the last 5 to 10 minutes of our meeting today, and that will be Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, please put them into the chat or raise your hand, and please address them with who you want to answer it.
Darren, if I may, Didar has actually wrote a question at the beginning of the meeting after I spoke, and I'd really love to start off with your question.
Of course, go ahead.
So firstly, thank you, Didar, and honestly, your work on digital public infrastructure is a great frame for this answer because I think that the steps developing countries need to prioritize map closely onto how DPI itself succeeded. So the first step, in my opinion, is to treat AI governance as infrastructure, not regulation, layered on top afterwards. The reason digital public goods worked in places like Bangladesh and India is that they were built as shared, interoperable public good infrastructure from the start, rather than as some sort of patchwork of private tools governments had to regulate after deployment. AI needs the same logic, if I may. That means governments prioritizing open, auditable models for public services, things like the National Helpline, free you mentioned, where citizens are directly affected so that bias and failure modes can actually be inspected rather than taken on faith from a vendor. The second step is sequencing capacity building before scale. A lot of AI adoption strategies start with deployment and treat training as something to backfill later. I'd actually reverse that. I'll try to cut it short, but the first step is designing for the last mile, not the average case, marginalized communities that are usually the ones excluded by edge cases. So the language not in the training data, the connectivity assumption that doesn't hold outside a capital city, the literacy assumption backed into citizen-facing interface. Practically, that means procurement and design standards that require testing against those edge cases explicitly, not just aggregate accuracy. So if I had to compress it, the priority order is firstly, build AI adoption on the same open, then interoperable logic that made DPI work, invest in local evaluation and audit capacity before scaling deployment, then design and test specifically for the populations most likely to succeed, to be excluded, well, firstly by default, rather than assuming inclusion will follow automatically from access. So thank you again for your question. Thank you, Darren.
Of course. Now, if anyone else would like to share their questions or raise their hand to ask that question, please go ahead. Okay, I see Murat asked the question, and after that we'll get to Shafkat, and then we should close it from there. So Murat asked, you build open source AI, a health critical model, ChatGPT 4.0 deprecated, millions lose support overnight. Could open source NGO communities preserve these models? And what role for the UN on SDG 3 on health critical AI preservation? And I could start with that, or if anyone else would like to take that, please go ahead.
I would like to follow up.
Yeah.
Please take the floor, Darren.
Yep. Max, go ahead, or I could start. Either. It's up to you.
You can start. Don't worry.
Okay.
You can start.
So, I think that question is a great question, Murat, and I think that it's very worth thinking about, because ChatGPT and open source AI and closed source AI like ChatGPT, and AI in general is very important for the newly and evolving space of digital health infrastructure. It is very important and also very good that now good, decent health advice is available by the tap and typing of someone's hand into an artificial intelligence large language model. Yet there is also the consideration of how open source NGO communities must moderate the ethical responses of these artificial intelligence models, because AI is always prone to making mistakes, and sometimes these mistakes can result to a misdiagnosis or a diagnosis that is not correct, or leads the user to be either too comfortable or too stressed about their actual real health situation. And so what open source NGO communities must do to preserve these models is to maintain their effectiveness, but also to moderate and inform people around the world that AI is not always right, and that you should always seek advice from a doctor if available, or from other digital health platforms that connect you to real people, because AI is prone to mistakes. And what role can the UN have on SDG 3 on health critical AI preservation? Well, for that, I'll give an example of SDG Youth Connect's partnership with the UNDP HDRO, and also our bilateral a few months ago with UNICEF. We've talked greatly in these bilaterals about how SDG 3, good health and well-being, can be focused on greatly via these AI agents, agentic artificial intelligence models that can be sent into, for example, war zones or places where health is not very accessible, to give people a well-moderated and better than regular large language model reviewed artificial intelligence model to make sure that they can reach health advice quickly. That's my answer to this question. Maximilian, if you'd like to go ahead. And just to inform everyone, we will be extending the session by 5 to 10 minutes to accommodate all questions, but we will officially end at 11:10. or in
Thank you for the floor, Darren. Just to preface this, I will be answering both that question and the question following. Feel free for any other panelists to follow up on my response. So on the role of AI and AI in general for health, according to the research that me and my colleagues did, one thing we did notice is there is a degree of possibility we could implement directly in the architecture of silicon enclaves on these chips. You see, the issue is not just that there's a lack of regulation, but more so there's a lack of a concrete policy backbone that technical experts and governments can actually monitor. And there's a lot of issue on data privacy, but we're not really talking about the data that's being processed. We're more so talking about monitoring the access and the activity on these silicon enclaves. One way we did propose in a model was called ACT. It's automatic compute throttling. And basically how GPUs work is they send a digital heartbeat via the throttle rate, which is how frequency moves through the semiconductors in a GPU. Given that GPUs, graphical processing units, are the key drivers for AI progress because they are the most complex and technically capable of running high degrees of compute power needed for large language models, we're able to directly measure through digital heartbeats, which are data anonymous, so it is compliant with some of the most strict civilian data protection laws globally. But at the same time, it gives us an insight critically into seeing where could we potentially locate suspiciously high data activity. And once we're able to do this, this opens the door for a completely new degree of leverage in terms of policy. We're able to see where is unsolicited, unregistered, and potentially illegal data language model processing and development. Where is this happening? We can trace down through satellite and through detection of these signals in large amounts where potentially underground facilities are running these development models without proper regulation. And concretely on your question on health, AI can be an incredibly important tool for a lot of students studying medicine. And it is also being used to find cures for diseases, to find patterns through its absolutely impressive pattern recognition abilities in genome sequencing. So it has the ability to improve health, but it also can be improved in terms of the regulation and how we approach AI concretely, whether that's through research, whether that's through regulation, or whether that's through the aforementioned two vectors of coordination between governments and civil society organizations. And on the next question about how open source AI has the potential to democratize innovation and why many young people in countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina still lack access to computing resources, mentors, and funding, what are the concrete actions that governments, UN agencies, and tech companies can do to ensure that youth from developing and smaller countries are not left behind far in the AI revolution? One thing that we have in common from anywhere from civil society organizations all the way to children who lack access to AI is that there is a significant fiscal paywall barrier to accessing efficient and the best state-of-the-art models that are usually the most impactful in terms of educational development, in terms of financial or business activity or economic activity. So as an actual tool, nobody wants to use the high hallucination level free-to-use model that's more likely to waste your time giving you wrong answers than something that can actually help you with what you want it to do. So concretely, one way what UN agencies have to absolutely implement, and governments in coordination because the UN works tightly with its member states, is first of all recognize that there must be action to be taken to make AI a global phenomenon in the sense that it is globally regulated, globally promoted as a commodity for good, and it's globally proliferated in a responsible way, not just in terms of economic incentives, not just in terms of cutting costs where it's convenient, but more so where it can be used to benefit those who need that help the most. And this can start by recognition that AI is not all bad, but there must be expertise implemented in its regulation. And then after that, there must be a reduction in this absolute growing gap between certain countries like the United States of America and other countries which completely lack computational power. And this ties into a common concern that was brought up multiple times in this meeting regarding the equity or lack thereof, if you may, in AI models, linguistic lack of equity. It's simply put because these companies from English-speaking regions tested it and used the data, open source data from English-speaking and Western country-speaking languages to train their models. Yes, Darren.
And I'll actually hand it off to Alexandra, and just wanted to say that this has been our last question. Alexandra will go ahead and I'll add a few of my thoughts, and then that shall be the conclusion of our meeting. And thanks again for everyone to attend.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Maximilian. I will actually go back to the question that Max was just talking about. So related to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Sorry for the pronunciation. So actually, the reason why I'm gonna be focusing on this question is that this question actually hits personally close to home, if I may say, because this gap you're describing in Bosnia is one I've seen directly in Abkhazia, another small, often overlooked region where the barrier was never talent or ambition. It was access to compute mentorship and funding pipelines that simply don't reach that far. So I'll try to break the concrete actions into three actors quickly because I think vague calls for more support don't go anywhere without specifying who does that. So, firstly, for the UN and multilateral bodies, I'm sorry, Maximilian, if I'll be repeating lots of the things you've said, but I really believe we should insist on those factors. So, the most concrete action is funding compute access directly, not just funding training programs. A young person can learn the theory from free online resources today. That part is already democratized. What isn't really democratized is the GPU time to actually train or fine-tune anything beyond the toy example. Multilateral bodies could fund regional compute credits or cloud access specifically earmarked for youth in smaller countries. Similar to how development funding earmarks infrastructure spending rather than leaving it to individual researchers to apply corporate credit programs that are oversubscribed and opaque. So the second part would be for governments. The concrete action is treating mentorship infrastructure. That means funding structured pipelines connecting youth in smaller countries to researchers abroad rather than just leaving mentorship informal, cold outreach log, etc., etc. So right now, a student in a country like Bosnia or a place like Abkhazia who wants a research mentor is largely on their own to find one. Governments should, I believe, fund formal mentorship and exchange programs the same way some already fund study abroad scholarships. So I'm gonna skip the third point because I don't want to take up too much of the time, and I know we're supposed to be finishing up now, so I'll just compress it real quick. So the common failure across all three is that current support assumes, we're already inside the system. Already, for instance, at a known university, already connected to a known mentor, already aware that the funding exists. The fix isn't, more about funding in the abstract. It's funding and access models specifically designed for people starting outside of the system we're talking about, which is exactly the population most at risk of being left behind in this AI revolution. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thank you so much, Alexandre. And I'll give my comments. Henry will give his, and then we will officially conclude. I'd just like to touch on a similar point that applies to this question about Bosnia and Herzegovina from Abdullah Fashkic. Thank you for him. And also from other certain points raised across the meeting, and that is ensuring that AI is equitable in terms of Afrocentric versus Eurocentric versus Asia-centric versus America-centric, and really all of the centers of culture across the world. And that really just comes from equitable data access and data that goes into the artificial intelligence models, because there's already an existing digital gap and digital infrastructure inequity across the world. Unfortunately, most of the data that goes into these models to train these models and that goes into the machine learning processes are data from Western society, particularly from Europe and North America. But what we can do as ourselves is to empower the global South with our organizations and personally, by giving them more opportunities to connect with tech, to do research and monetary funding in general. And so, as civil society or as a person from either the global North or global South, what you can do is support civil societies like SDGs Connect, like the Liminal Minds Initiative, and like all the other nonprofits that are represented here today, to make sure that equitable data access is there for all, and therefore artificial intelligence is equitably represented all groups of society. And now, Henry, you can complete the meeting with your statement. And thank you everyone for attending.
All right. Thank you, Darren. Since I think you forgot to present to the people my profile, but basically the fact that I'm a researcher, I'm calling upon you and the team at the UN SDG Youth Connect to allow those different researchers in the AI to come down to Africa. They engage us and we help them develop some of the things to make sure the open source AIs that we have are speaking to our needs. The critical question we should all live with is, do we really need open source AI? If the answer is yes, we should ask ourselves, whose needs are we addressing? Are we addressing the needs of a European? Are we addressing the needs of an Asian? Are we addressing the needs of an African? Are we addressing the needs of someone else on another planet or continent? So therefore, I call upon you and all those experts that are putting hands-on into the AI work and research to come down here, engage us from different countries. I'm down here in Uganda, East Africa, and we see how we can help the world, the universe, to achieve its own goal and make sure we are moving at the same pace. And maybe even if they're leaving us, we should at least be slightly behind you or not significantly far away from you. Thank you. Over to you.
Of course, and thank you again. We have now officially reached the conclusion of our meeting today. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And this has been a great start to the UN Open Source Week as its first online event. And thank you so much, everyone attending. I'm Darren, Alexander, Max, Maria, Samuel, Henry, and Armin, who was unable to present himself. Thank you, all of our speakers. Thank you, all of our participants. And I'm now ending it. But before we end it, I will ask one thing, and that is a screenshot with if everyone can turn on their cameras. That'd be amazing.
Darren, if I may add before we take a group screenshot, I want to give, first of all, a special thank you to you for organizing all of this and to the rest of the speakers, especially Max, because we've worked closely on preparation for this. We will be in the future working together on the research he is currently pursuing. And I thank you all. I thank all the participants that attended today, especially those that asked questions that are going to follow up with us. All the contacts are in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you, Darren, again. Thank you.
Of course. 5, everyone smile. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day wherever you are in the world. Night, morning, afternoon.
It's a night in
Thank
Africa.
you. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It's a wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Very helpful. Thank you, everyone from Nigeria. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone from Cameroon.
Bye, everyone.
From
Bye.
Haiti.
From Bangladesh.
Oh,
Bye,
bye,
everyone from
everyone.
Florida.
Nigeria, thank you so much.
Nigeria.
Haiti.
Ghana is
Bye.
today.
Yep.
Hi,
Thank you,
everyone
everyone.
from
And
Senegal.
yep. Great. I will be closing the meeting now. It's late where I am right now. So thank you again, all the speakers, everyone who's still here. Thank you for participating, and have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
Of course.